This is Keeping Skor: creativity, curiosity, and the things we keep. In this episode, we start with a general conversation about music, but it quickly becomes a discussion about what it means to build your entire life around something you care deeply about. Prior to speaking with Jeff, I knew he was really into music. He has a large music collection, he hosts a music focused podcast, he plays guitar and bass, and he's written multiple books about bands he's spent years thinking about and listening to. So, what stood out right away is that these things are not casual interests of Jeff's. For Jeff, music is something much bigger. It's something he returns to constantly, not just to listen, but to understand, to explore, and to share with other people. To paraphrase a bit, Jeff preaches the gospel of music. We talk about the intensity, the depth, and the unique power of music to keep pushing you farther and farther along a personal path of discovery. We get into how collecting can turn into something much more over time, how listening leads to writing, how writing leads to podcasting, and how all these things connect us to the world. You can hear Jeff and his musical partners' podcast Radical Research at radicalresearch.org. And from there, you can also check out Jeff's latest book, Always Moving: The Strange Multiverse of Voivod. So, on the surface, this is a conversation about music, but it's really about passion, wonder, and what happens when you follow something all the way down the rabbit hole. This is Keeping Skor. Enjoy the conversation. What's up, Jeff?
Hey, how you doing, man?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm doing well. Doing well. Do you go by Steven or Steve?
Either way. Either way.
Okay. No
Either way.
preference. Okay. Well, I'll just call you Skorsky. How about
Actually, that's great. I love that.
that?
And we're recording if you're good with that.
Oh yeah, of course. Yep.
Okay. Okay. Cool. All right. Dude, I'm so excited.
Yeah,
Super.
good.
Yeah.
Me too. Me
Yeah.
too. It's a
Real.
little slightly different topic than I usually get interviewed about, so that's fun.
Yeah. Well, we'll go all over the place, I suspect. I mean, I kind of had a I don't really prepare for these too much, very intentionally, because I like it, to be just more organic, of a conversation than anything. But in this case, it was particularly difficult to even kind of wrap my head around what we might talk about.
Sure.
So, which has been really enjoyable. So I'm gonna just kind of set the scene a little bit about how much we kind of know each other, and that's pretty little, really.
Yeah.
Um, we know each other from baseball, and
Right.
this is I don't know if you know this, but this is my memory or my first memory of you. And that is, I think like, I mean, I could be wrong about this, but I know I hadn't played in a while. And I'm not sure if you had not played in a while. Am I right in saying that you had not played baseball in a while before we got
By
this?
the time you showed up that year, which was last year, 2025, I had been in the group since June, and you, of course, take the summers off and you come back like, late summer, early fall, I think. So I had been playing and getting better, but I hadn't played baseball in before 2025 for probably 30 years.
Okay, okay, yeah, that's what I was, yeah, kind of thinking, and sort of a lot of us were like that. Um, but okay, so this is my memory, right? As you say, like I came back from the summer. And I'm out there, I'm playing in the infield, and you come up to bat. And I think, I hadn't seen you, just hadn't seen anything before. And you have a pretty easy swing. I don't I it's
Thank you.
when you look at it, right? Pretty smooth, pretty easy. And again, like I'm like, okay, this is, like the rest of us, haven't done this in a while, getting our bearings. And you took some swings and okay, and I'm sitting there in the infield, and I'll be honest with you, I got a little bit kind of complacent.
Ah,
And dude, you hit a rocket at me, an absolute rocket. One bounce off my chest, and I was like, oh man.
what feels good is like, and I've stopped. I have this thing because I'm 56. I'm almost 57. I'll be 57 and later in May. And I always want to. I've never hit a home run in my life. When I was in Little League, I couldn't get it over the fence, nothing like that. And I didn't play into my junior high years or my high school years, so just never had the opportunity to hit a home run, or maybe not good enough. And when I first started to bat, you weren't there, but my first few at bats, the first few weeks I went, first few Sundays, I was hitting pretty good. Like I was getting them out in the outfield. I'm like, wow, I'm better than I thought. I thought I'd be fucking. Sorry, can I say that? You'll bleep it.
You can curse. That's all right.
Okay. I thought I'd be terrible, and like I was getting close to the fence. I was sometimes bouncing onto the fence, and I thought, well, I can hit a home run. So I started to think home run, and then
Mm.
after a little while, I started to think, no, just think on base percentage, hit good hits, make good hits, and so I'm really happy that you say that that you were scared of that. Of not you didn't say scared, but it surprised you. You got complacent, and it surprised you, and I like that because I feel a good bit of power off of my bat, and like at my age, mid 50s, I'm like, I'll take it. You know what I mean? I really like the crack of the bat and the ball, and if I can just connect, I'm happy. So I'm happy that that ball jumped up, and I'm glad it didn't hurt you. But it's a dangerous game. The first my first Sunday, very first one, Patrick was up there pitching, and I hit him in the shin, pretty hard. And I just thought, man, we're all taking chances out here, even at
Yeah.
our amateur level. But it's just a ton of fun. So,
Yeah. No, it's awesome. And I mean, in the way I look at it, if I take one off the chest, that's on me.
well, yeah, yeah,
You
yeah.
gotta
Well,
be,
look, yeah. The field's not a professional field. It's the bounces can be rough
right, right. Yeah, but you know how that goes. You feel that competitive side of me is like, yep, get that ball.
for
So
sure.
yeah, but anyway, that was funny to me. And ever since then, I'm like, okay, Jeff's up. Let me make sure I focus in here a little bit.
Oh, thank you. I
Um,
appreciate that. I know you were pitching one time to me, and you gave me some great advice. I was probably having my worst day at the plate so far. I think it was late last year, and I for some reason I thought, well, I'm just going to choke up. But I was so close to the plate that you're like, wait a minute, man. And I love that kind of constructive criticism because nobody in our little Sandlot team is competitive in a dickish kind of jockey way. It's just more sharing information and having fun. And I really appreciated your
yeah.
bit of guidance because I can tell, I've seen you hit and you're a monster. And I'm like, I'll take advice from you any day, because this guy's clearly really good.
Well, thanks, man. We could just end the podcast right there.
And
Okay, thank you. We're
on a
done.
high note,
No, thanks. I appreciate that. But yeah, it's super super fun. Can't wait to get out there this Sunday. Uh,
absolutely.
Okay, so here's the thing. So usually, I like to start out with kind of one of, getting to know you kind of question, especially when I really don't know the person, outside, very limited, kind of contact. And so I do want to get to one of those questions, but before we even get to that, before we even get to the topic, I was thinking about it, and you're an author. You've written 4 books. You're a collector. You're a podcaster. I'm sure you're a lot of other things that I don't know about yet. But those are 3 pretty big things, right? And so in my mind, I'm thinking Jeff's really passionate about music. And that's
Oh, yeah.
just the opening question is just this word passion. Like when you hear it, what do you think about? How does it fit in your life? Is it something you think about? Is it energy? Is it a philosophy? Like again, without even getting into the subject itself, maybe like what is it that you get out of kind of these things that you do? Or maybe what's driving you to do these things?
I mean, those 5 letters, music, music. Like ever since I can remember. And I know a lot of us, of course, have this awakening moment with music early in our lives because it's such a human thing, right?
Mm.
And we respond to it, and it's just this other language, and it's another type of expression. I've just always been really passionate about it. And the thing was, you asked me how much I think about it, or if I think about it a lot. Like I can't stop thinking about it. Like I love. When I'm not listening to music or not writing about it or not talking about it, I'll think about it in my head in so many various ways, so many myriad ways, and I'm just fueled by it, and I never get sick of it. I mean, I certainly when I have like a deep listening session, I can go about 4 hours, and I
Mm.
just have a blast. It's my favorite time of the week, and I do it several times a week. But your ears can get fatigued. You need a break just with anything good, but I just really love it. And what I found was as I became more involved and became sort of, I guess, an extracurricular fan or a super fan, um, I guess the main thrust for me is I I want to evangelize. I don't I'm never trying to be snobby about it. I don't think there's any rights or wrongs here, but I do like to evangelize in the sense of like turning people on. And I have through all of many, many, many different things I've done, because I've mostly been employed as a super fan most of my adult life since I was 24, I guess. Um, is I apparently have the ability to turn a lot of people on to a lot of different music over the years. I've gotten a lot of feedback, shit ton of feedback over the years about you turn me on to this. This is in my DNA because of you. I've collected 40 different versions of this album because you turned me on to it 20 years ago in your writing with Metal Maniacs or whatever it was. And so I just of all the hats I've worn in the music industry, my favorite one is the one where I can turn people on. I love to share. I love to uh, try to help people see what's great about a particular song or album or band that I like. And it doesn't always click, and we all have different opinions and tastes. But uh, if that sums it up, I'm just the passion. Yeah, it's an incredible passion. I don't like when people call what I do a hobby.
Oh
Oh,
yeah.
what's your hobby? Oh, you listen to music? No, no, that's far more than a hobby. It's water, blood, oxygen. I need it as much as um, all of that stuff. So
Mm.
yeah,
Okay. Well, there's like 17 things there that we'll need to talk about. But before we do that, let's set the foundation a little bit. Meaning, let's get to know you. What first? Give me a typical day, right? What's typical day in your life? What's it look like? Could pick the day you want. It could be a weekend, could be a
yeah,
weekday.
yeah. I
Maybe
mean,
they're all the same.
not really. No, they're not all the same. I've worked from home since 2001.
Hmm.
I used to work in offices, like, for instance, a magazine in New York City. I was working on Park Avenue at a publisher. Before that, I worked in a record label in Pennsylvania. I mean, I've just been kind of all over, I'm a kind of an early adopter of the work at home thing, 2001. Um, so I don't have, depending what job I'm doing or what pursuit or project I have going on, no day is typical. And I'm definitely not going to belabor this unless you would ask more about it. But my wife and I experienced a horrible, terrible disaster a year and a half ago with a house fire. And no day anymore is typical of what it used to be. Do you know what I mean? Like
Hmm.
it's dealing with the contractors, dealing with watching our house get demolished. It's dealing with the new builder, and it's dealing with insurance. It's still, it still reverberates after about a year and a half. So definitely we're in this weird transitional phase. But right now, I mean, it's almost fair to say I'm semi-retired because I've had to deal with a lot of this stuff related to the fire and related to where we're going to live and related to all this. And I thankfully had the luxury to do that for a number of different reasons. So no, I don't have a typical day, but I will say that um, the normal day or the average day would be me waking up, having coffee with my wife, maybe doing a little gardening because that's something I'm really into. Um, I get right to work after that. I do whatever it is I do, whether it's selling uh, various items on Discogs, because I like to buy when I can. It's rare, but when I can, I buy big collections and do that and now that's a hobby,
Hmm.
and that's fun. I'll do some of that. If I'm doing any writing project whatsoever, I block out 3 to 4 hours each day, each weekday to do that. I'm a cyclist. I like to get out on my road bike and do that. I, will sometimes take long walks with my wife or by myself and listen to music that way. And then 2 or 3 nights, hopefully, I've got a long stretch of hours to listen to music, do the hi-fi thing, whether it's headphones or open air. Um, bit of an audiophile nerd. I've had to build back my entire uh, hi-fi after the fire, but thankfully we got some contents coverage and I was able to buy some good gear. Um, and just spend time around my wife and my cats. And I try to sock in some reading there too, because I do a lot of reading. So I'm
Hmm.
never bored. Like I'm really, I have enough diverse interests that I just wonder about people that say, "Oh, I'm so bored." It's like, well, maybe you're boring. You know what I mean? Like,
Right.
it's
Yeah.
there's so much out there, and I like what I like a lot, and I'm one of these people, and you probably as a collector yourself and having a podcast about collecting, these people know that when you get into something, you really get into it, and I'm kind of like that. I mean, I'm kind of like all the way.
Hmm.
I want to know everything. Like I watch English gardening shows because I want to know how they do it and what their philosophies are and what all the things you can learn. So
Hmm.
yeah, I think that's a fair overview of my day. And volleying back and forth emails and texts with people I've built friendships with over the years, whether it's close friends or just kind of people that consider themselves followers of what I do. I befriended a lot of those people, and that's a whole other thing because I'm,
Yeah.
I'm constantly sort of just communicating with people, and it's I think every single one of my close friends or even distant friends is it's because of music.
Hmm. So, okay, and you can say about this, whatever you comfortable with or not comfortable with, because you did mention the fire, right?
Yeah,
And we've talked a little bit about that, and I know, I mean, I cannot imagine what what you and your wife went through. I mean, honestly, that the idea of sort of all of these things that have been with you for a long time, right? And things that are important to you, right? These are the things that didn't get thrown away.
sure.
Um, and then, almost, within hours, it's gone. Um,
Yeah, yeah,
so, without, I mean, you really get into whatever you want, but I guess we could focus just specifically on the objects that were lost.
sure,
And so
sure.
sometimes, when we, have these conversations with people, there is kind of a question that's like, well, if your collection went away tomorrow, or, that kind of question, but it's very, I don't know, it's very theoretical, um, hypothetical. But for you, it actually happened.
Yeah,
And I
right,
wonder,
right.
how do you, tell us what you want about that. Meaning,
Sure,
is there a
sure.
way to process that? Did that part of it hurt more than you expected, less than you expected? I mean, just help us understand how you process losing these objects that obviously mean a lot to you.
Sure, thank you. Yeah, if I was told before the fire that one day I would lose 3,000 CDs and some of my vinyl collection, and there's a spoiler there. I was able to save a lot of my collection. We can talk about that in a second. The vinyl wise, I mean, but every single book I owned, which was a couple thousand probably, I had a ton. Very dear family heirlooms. If I was told I was going to lose all of that sort of stuff, things you collect, non-animal or non-human things, I think I would have been absolutely just beside myself with disbelief and thinking that I could never go on. But when you lose four dear animals, we had I'm a crazy cat person. I love cats so much. They have enhanced my life so much. I'm very close to them. You have to take the time to get to know a cat, and
Yeah.
and they will give you love. It's just, I just have a special touch with them. My wife does too. We just love them. We lost four that night. Well, we lost three, and then 30 days later, one that sustained a lot of burns passed away. And I had had her for about 12 years. Losing that, and yes, the house. We had a beautiful old restored Victorian in Greensboro that we lost. It was on the historic register. It's a grand and wonderful, beautiful thing. But losing the animals made losing any part of my collection, any original art, any book, any of that stuff, it made it just trivial as hell. I'm not going to say I wasn't affected and burned by it. No pun intended. It sucked losing that stuff. But really, I didn't even think about that stuff right away. I kind of had it in the back of my mind, but what we had to deal with right away was this grief about the animals, was this grief about the house, was an entirely new life. Where are we going to get underwear? Where are we going to get socks on the first day? You know what I mean? Like, uh,
Mm.
you know, we did have a lot of help from strangers and friends and family and all that, and Red Cross and all that, but um, it really put things in perspective. So I can tell anybody out there who has a massive collection, if you lose it, um, it's painful. But if you lose it against something like a child or an animal, which our animal are children for me, it's nothing, and you deal with it. And you also realize, especially with music, I think books is another. My book collection was a total loss, absolute total loss, um, because of smoke and fire damage. If they weren't burned up, they were drowned in water, drowned in soot, and that those are harder to get back. Those are harder to access, especially since I'm not an ebook guy. Um, Whereas music, it's in the air. Like the day this happened, it happened early in the morning, at 2:30 in the morning, just and very, very, very suddenly. It was a misfire of a heating pad on our front porch for animals. Um, that night, I guess you'll call it fan of mine or somebody who follows me and um, got my address from me and sent me a pair of headphones, Bluetooth headphones, so that with my phone, which I came out of the house with me that night, I could listen to music. I wasn't ready to listen to music, but what I realized was that music's always there. It doesn't have to be in its physical form for it to be there. Music is invisible. Music is curved air. And I once I was ready to listen to music, I started doing a lot more streaming on Tidal on my phone with some decent headphones that I really liked, thanks to this wonderful benefactor friend, and it softened the blow a little bit. And in fact, I had a collection of two CDs because they were the ones in the car, and the
Yeah.
car didn't get destroyed. So I carried around these two CDs to our various rentals and Airbnbs until we got a little more permanent living space. Um, but I took pictures. This is my collection right now. Got two CDs, and
Wow.
but I guess to answer your question in the shorter way, it's perspective. You know, I was able to gain perspective and realize that music will always be there, even if that original artifact of some vinyl piece I had 40 years ago isn't, or that, rare CD that I had from Norway from 20 years ago is not there. It's okay, you know.
Mm.
Um, However, I've begun collecting again in earnest. I want to get back what I had. I've gotten sent a lot of things by a lot of different people. So yeah.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate that. Again, it's a, I mean, again, just such a tragic, painful experience, that obviously, again, like, if you haven't gone through it, it's not really I don't think anyone could really wrap their head around it. So
That's for sure. I don't
appreciate
think I
you.
could have.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think I could have either. I didn't mean to interrupt you, but like when the LA fires happened, this was 2 or 3 months after the big ones from early 25. Um, I had a lot more empathy because I was just fresh out of my own fire. And I think I had a lot of understanding about the terror and the loss and all of that. Um, Way better than I would have if I was just an outside observer before the fire. You know what I mean? You can think that
Hmm.
you understand that it's painful and it's terrible and all that, but there's something so horribly visceral about the experience. And you know, you learn who you are, and you grow from this experience. So there is that aspect of this as well. So yeah.
Hmm. So then maybe just again to kind of just follow up on what you're saying. Is there what's the larger life perspective then? We asked about the collection, and I love your kind of statement about, well, it's perspective, and kind of realizing like, yep, before I thought that part, kind of losing all of these objects would kind of affect you in a way that ultimately it still hurt, but it didn't that part didn't devastate you. Did this whole experience give you some other perspective on just life in general that,
Oh,
that's really noticeable to you? Like, yeah, before I felt this way, and now I definitely feel this other way.
do you mean about physical objects we collect,
No,
or do you
no,
mean in a more
just
general
life
sense?
in general.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I was just talking to a friend about that. But one thing I realized pretty early on was it teaches you to not sweat the small stuff so much.
Mm,
For instance, we were moving into our first real rental, the one that was going to be, we were going to be in for at least 6 months, which was just heaven compared to, moving around every 2, 3, 4 days, up to that point. And I was taking something from the car, just a basket of stuff. And we had some little ceramic item in it that either somebody gave us or something we recovered. I don't know. But it fell on the ground and it broke. And the old me, the pre-fire me, would have been like, God, fuck, damn it, like just like sweating that thing. And because it wasn't like some super valuable family heirloom thing, I just was like, I laughed at it. I'm like, I've lost a lot more than that. I'm
yeah.
not going to sweat the small stuff. Yes, I'll try to be careful. Yes, I'll try to conduct myself in a way that I'm just not, breaking everything around. But like, it just taught me that was a very valuable lesson. And I will tell you, just to cap this out, the night of the fire, we escaped our area. We escaped our backyard, through our backyard over the fence, because we couldn't get through the driveway because the fire truck had just pulled up by the time we got in the car. Uh, and so we had to jump this fence with our surviving dog and one surviving cat, the one cat that survived somehow got out. We have these animals in our arms. We're half naked because we were sleeping, um, and we go into the ambulance. And we lived in College Hill, and there's that College Hill Sundries bar, kind of a College Hill institution, and they were just closing. It was about 3 a.m. So whoever was working was just they were hanging out with a couple of friends, and they were around the neighborhood. They saw all the commotion that was going on, the sirens, the noise, and we were in this ambulance. And somebody from there, like two or three people, as I remember, threw some clothes into the ambulance for us, knowing that
Oh,
we would need something. It was a cold night. It was like, late November. And the thing that landed on top of the pile was a sweatshirt from a sketch comedy show. Comedy is also another huge passion of mine, but a sketch comedy show that I absolutely worship called I Think You Should Leave with
hmm.
Tim Robinson. And it was his dorky ass face on the front, and the I Think You Should Leave logo. And then I could see something on the sleeve that was like from one of the best skits of that show. And I looked at it, and the sirens are going, and I know some cats of ours are dying, and I know we're losing shit. And I just looked at that, and I wanted to laugh. And my wife locked eyes with me, and she looked at it, and because she knows how crazy I am for that show, she turned me on to it. And we realized that we kind of both wanted to laugh. We've talked about it since. We didn't really laugh then, but we talked about it since. And it was just this really valuable lesson or realization that humor is going to be around no matter if you want it there or not. You know, levity will be there for you when you
Mm.
need it. And that was a moment of levity. It was a moment of like, wow, I can't, because I had this also very selfish thought, like, I can't wait to wear that. That's ugly and it's awesome. Like because
Yeah.
I'm a guy that, you've seen me at baseball. I'm always wearing band shirts. It's what I wear the stuff I love on my sleeve, literally. And so I just couldn't wait to acquire that. I was like, oh my God, that's awesome, but like, I shouldn't be thinking about that. My cats are dying. I knew my cats were dying. I knew that we were losing objects, and I just felt like um, I mean, it was devastating. There
Yeah.
aren't even words for it. But yet, again, this is what it taught me was that there's always going to be this levity, or there's always going to be this moment to laugh, even in the worst of times. So
Mm.
I wonder if people like in say a war zone or something go through that. You know,
Yeah.
it seems like probably from what I've read and things I've documentaries I've seen that perhaps it does. But yeah, that's
Mm.
yeah, those are so does the perspective change on life? Oh my God, yes. And you hope you become a better person. You also accept that grief will be with you always.
Mm.
And you don't need to push it away. You do need to deal with it. You do need to accept it. You do need to honor it. But it does change you. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, again, I really appreciate you sharing that. I mean, that's an experience that most of us will never go through. But I think when you talk about, I don't know, the I don't know, the tragedy of life, those moments where you don't want to experience it. Nobody should ever have to experience it. It's sort of like an emotional intensity that, you just think, well, there's no way I could make it through that. So to
Yeah.
hear your perspective, about that, there was actually some, I don't know if good is the right word, but some positive kind of mental shifts, came out of it, and to hear what those are, yeah, again, I just really appreciate that. I'm sure it's not an easy thing to talk about. So,
It's not, but it's also, believe it or not, even after all this time and all this talk, I mean, it was, after a week, I remember like the week after, I was like, I am so sick of talking about the fire, like,
right.
um, but after a while, it dies down just a little bit, at least communication with other people about it. Like my wife and I live it still every day, but it is therapeutic to talk about. It's not, it doesn't hurt me too much. There are aspects of it I don't like to talk about. My wife asked me something about it 2 nights ago. She was wondering about something, regarding when the event happened that night and when I woke up to weird sounds.
Mm,
That's something I have a hard time talking about.
yeah.
But otherwise, no, it's actually pretty therapeutic, and it's nice to pass this on to other people who may at some point deal with something that is seemingly insurmountable, and hopefully I can just impress on that person that hey, you will get through it. It's going to be okay. I know that sounds trite, but like it's going to be okay.
Yeah.
We're going to get through this. You know.
Yeah. Yeah. No, man, that's awesome. Again, I appreciate hearing that. Um, well, let's shift gears a little bit here. You know, we've heard, kind of through some of these things that you're talking about. I think we're getting to know you a little bit, which is really fantastic. Um, but I guess when you think of yourself, right, again, you have this podcast, to Radical Research, correct?
Yes.
That's the name of the case. So you got this Radical Research podcast. Again, you have these four books. This collection of music and books and other things. So, when you think of yourself, what's the label? Are there labels that kind of feel good? Are you a collector? Are you a fan? Are you a writer, a creator, an archivist? I'm always very, very curious how people sort of view themselves in relation to this, kind of, I think of them as archives, but of this thing that you're putting
Sure.
together. What are the labels
Sure.
that feel good for you?
Well, the first thing that I thought of as a label was just one that my co-editor at that magazine in New York had called me once. He said, "You're incorrigible," and I took that as a compliment. I don't think he meant it that way because he was just sort of like I wanted to buy something. It was at J&R Music World down in Lower Manhattan. I
Nice.
wanted to
Yeah,
buy
sure.
something that wanted to buy something that he thought I could just get for free from some publicist, because I was getting free music all the time. And I was like, no, I want it right now. It was a new Porcupine Tree album. And and he's like, dude, you can get that from so and so. I'm like, I don't care. I want to buy it. I want to support it. He's like, you're incorrigible. So, but I think that leads to the more serious answer to your question, which is passionate. You used that word again. I'm just very passionate. I really like. I don't know what else I could do in my life. Quite honestly, I'm glad I went this route. I'm glad I followed my heart and my nose and landed where I did, because this is really. I shouldn't say it's all I care about. I guess you've heard that I love animals, I love gardening, I love nature, I love, books, blah, blah, blah. But really, at the end of the day, the thing I want the most is music around me, around you, around everybody else. I think it's the most wonderful thing that man's ever invented, and so I'm passionate, and I'm also an evangelist about it. Again, I'm not people in people's face so much because I have other outlets. I have books, I have podcasts, I have um, articles I've written for other people, or whatever it is, Um, so I don't know. I guess when I look at myself, I think of myself as a passionate evangelist for music, somebody who wants to share what's so beautiful about this stuff.
Hmm. Okay. Okay. I love it. I love evangelists. I actually, as I took a few notes as you were talking, and that was the one I put in all capital letters.
Cool.
Um, so tell me about music to you, what it means to you. Why is it so special? I mean, let's face it. I think most people on the planet have some relationship to music, right? It's very,
Sure.
very rare that you meet someone who's like, yeah, I don't like music, right? So
Right, right, right.
it happens
Those are the
on
people that end up in an Oliver Sacks book or something.
right, exactly. Uh, so okay, we know there's a few outliers, but most people have some, relationship to music, but you have something that's fairly unique. I was going to actually ask a question that was like, hey, tell me, if music wasn't in your life, and I'm like, that's a dumb question because I think you've answered like there is no, like it just like
Yeah.
Jeff music, right? These things seem so intertwined. So before we even ask about like, what music you're into, what you grew up listening, all that stuff that we want to know, what is it that's so special about music, in your opinion, that makes it worth preaching this gospel to the masses?
Well, honestly, this could be another spoiler, especially for people who know me. But I've been wondering about what my fifth book is going to be about, and I've been toying for years and making many notes in my phone about writing a book about just listening to music and
Nice.
getting many different people in on the big question. Because I read so many interviews, and I've done so many interviews as an interviewer, and some less as an interviewee, but I've certainly have been interviewed a lot, and we usually dance around it simply because it almost seems silly or maybe too obvious to ask the question you just asked. What is it about music? But I'm fascinated by that question. I always have been. And I like to dig into that. So my answer to you, it's multifold. You have a time limit here. I could go on for hours, but honestly, as I've gotten older and hopefully a little wiser, I feel like I'm not misanthropic, but I also see the truth and the ugliness in humanity, and I don't believe it's going to get a whole lot better. I really just have a very pessimistic viewpoint about humanity. I think the Earth may be better off without us, but the things that make us great are the reasons you can justify us. You know what I mean? That's sort of my take on us.
Hmm.
And I think that music is the greatest of all the arts. So it's the greatest thing that humanity has ever done that separates us from the other animals. You know, I think it's that special, and it's that deep and meaningful of a language and a communication device and a way to feel. Um, Aldous Huxley, one of the only quotes I really know by heart is one by Aldous Huxley that I love, and it's after silence, that which comes nearest to expressing the inexpressible is music. And I really resonate with that. That's exactly what I think about it. It takes me to places that I could get nowhere else. No drug, no amazing slice of pizza, none of the other great things, no great sex, none of the other great things in life will ever come close to getting me as deep as I can go when I'm in total surrender to music. And I really try to get there every session that I listen. It doesn't always happen. And sometimes it's more fun. Sometimes if I'm taking a road trip to Raleigh, probably to see a show by a band that plays music, I'm listening to music, and it's maybe a little more casual, and maybe you're not as deep into it and you're just sort of, just jamming and singing along. It's great. But really, honestly, like that deep travel that it can offer at its best is what I'm after, and it's what I find just always so magical about it. I also find that it's amazing that as immersed as I have been in it, I've just not even become sick of it. In fact, the guy I do the podcast with, Hunter Ginn, he and I have talked several times about, isn't it amazing that like we're just getting more and more into music as we get older? It just doesn't stop. The attraction and the curiosity, I guess. So it's hard to answer that question briefly, but that's about the best I can do. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I mean, I'm with you. I do think I've had this conversation with composer and performer friends of mine. I always like to know what they think about it. Because again, they're sort of so intimately tied to music in a way that I'm not. And it's always interesting. It's always interesting the questions that you get because I mean, I guess the way I always think about it is music is so unique. Um, it doesn't do, I mean, it does many things that other things do, but it does all of them. When you talk about, the time traveling, the kind of the communication, the
Yeah.
language, the getting deep within your side inside of yourself and getting far outside of yourself. Like, it does all the fact that it can make someone dance at a distance, I
Right.
always think about it like if music didn't exist and somebody described to you this thing, you would say, well, that's not possible. You're literally
Right.
talking witchcraft, like that you
Yeah.
can't have something that does what you're saying.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so no,
Yeah.
I
Yeah. It's
appreciate
it
your
it's
answer.
magic. And I'm not a believer. I'm not religious. I look at the world in a very scientific way. So magic is a word I would never use except for music. I mean, it really is.
Yeah,
I mean, I'll put that tag on it. It's magical
yeah.
because it does, like you said, it holds all those properties, all those um, not only like life affirming properties, but ones that seem perhaps in opposition. And then there's the whole thing about like, you know, there's music out there that I absolutely detest. I'm like, I don't understand how to like that,
Hmm.
but, I get that somebody else does. And that's why, I don't believe in really slagging somebody for liking a certain kind of music. I can definitely offer, hard critique on stuff I don't think is very good and why. But to slag anybody for liking any kind of music, I've always thought that was some of the lowest behavior, um, because
Yeah.
it's just you're responding to something that's somebody's in tune with. So that's great.
Hmm.
It's funny when I have this thing where my wife and I'll be driving along in town, and you'll see somebody behind the wheel just fucking bopping and singing and just they're just in thrall to that music,
Yeah,
and I always point that out to her every time. I'm like, look at that person. I love that. I just love seeing that, and it makes me happy. So
yeah, yeah. No, that's great. All right, so the way you described it, again, beautiful. So answer these two questions at once. Um, the first one is, what kind of music did you grow up around? And when was the first time you felt what you just described to us?
yeah, okay, that's pretty easy. I didn't grow up in a family that listened to music a ton. Wasn't it, I read about musicians or just other fans who grew up in this wild musical household. I really didn't. It was around. I mean, music's everywhere. My mom would watch the Michael Douglas show and it had theme music, but my dad was into crap like the Four Tops and stuff that I just couldn't, relate to as a 4 or 5 year old. Um, so my first, you know, I was around it, and the first things that came my way that made me feel the way that I was describing earlier, that were really impactful, were two songs. "Seasons in the Sun" by Terry Jacks.
Hmm.
Somehow, I had one of those plastic Fisher Price record players that actually played records, but it was junk. Um, to my now 56-year-old hi-fi snob mind, but like, at the time it worked. And somehow I got a hold of this 7-inch record. Who knows how you get that stuff, but Seasons in the Sun was just this emotional thing, and it was profound. It wasn't dorky. It sort of struck something deeper in my 5-year-old heart. And a similar song, I think, in some ways, that moved me so much and almost moved me to tears. I remember was Kermit the Frog's "Green." just because I like the message so much about, it doesn't matter what I am, I'm beautiful as I am. There's a little bit of that. It's one of the reasons that Elephant Man is one of my favorite kind of stories or movies or things that's ever happened. Is just like, this beauty in ugliness, or this beauty in just being who you are. And so
Hmm.
those two songs just kind of spoke to me and struck a chord. And, it would be a year or two later that I discovered something that really turned me on. If you want to go there yet, I don't know. Uh, but it would be Kiss. I was one of these many, many, many people who 70s Kiss, and I was at the right age, and I was very interested in music. It was a total gateway. I mean, it just broke down the doors because they seemed like world builders. They seemed like something beyond human. They seemed like, and I didn't get any of the sexual innuendo. You know what I mean? I didn't know what plaster caster meant. I didn't know any of that. But the songwriting and the playing and just everything about them just spoke to me. And I'll still defend 70s Kiss. I think that stuff's, no, I will. I think that stuff's still great. I really do. And I followed them into the 80s and 90s, and I've seen them a ton live. And, you know, I have a lot of critique about them. They've made some really lousy moves. They've made some really lousy music, but like, um, I think that their influence is inarguable, no matter what you think about them. It's like when Ace Frehley
Right.
died last year. It was amazing how many people came out and said, I started playing guitar because of this guy. People who, people like Kim Thale from Soundgarden, or, I mean, it just, I'm not going to start naming names because it was just so vast and broad. You're like, damn, man, those guys had an impact, and a very positive one at that.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's kind of my intro to music in a nutshell. And I was
Mm.
always, music class was my favorite class in school, and anything regarding music was great. I always, and I was seeking out magazines that Kiss was in, like whether it was Hit Parader and Cream, or the teeny bopper ones like Tiger Beat. Yeah, it was just yeah, there it
Dude,
is.
I love it. Okay. So, so interesting because a couple of things. The Kermit the Frog song. I be honest. I'm not sure that I know it.
Okay. Okay.
But the Seasons in the Sun. Same thing. I mean, as a little kid. I mean, even now, I mean, that is, I mean, I don't know. That song could definitely make me cry. I mean, like,
Yeah, it's good. It's good, man.
yeah,
It works. Yeah, yeah.
there's something about that song. Like, if I was to kind of open that gate a little bit, 100%. So I so can relate to that. And it's so interesting as little kids, how in touch you are with your emotions. And then when something, really external to you kind of gets you in that way, it's amazing, oh my God, like as a kid, you go, haven't experienced that. So that of course I love that story. But the thing about Kiss, now I just have to insert this. One of my very, very best friends, I mean, my oldest friend, this guy Jerry, I mean, I've known him since I was like 7, probably. We have had this lifelong battle about which band is better, Kiss or Motley Crue. And he is just a diehard Kiss fan. And it was probably 3 days ago. I was on the phone with him for a couple hours. And the way you're talking about Kiss was just, I had to hear a sermon on why, Paul Stanley is, the greatest songwriter of all time. And,
Well, he's certainly a better vocalist than Vince Neil. I mean, you have to admit.
Oh man, welcome to my world. One of the best nights we ever had was we went and saw them when they were on tour together.
Oh yeah,
Uh,
yeah, yeah, sure. Yeah.
it was so good. I've seen Kiss a ton. Because I'm with you. I love Kiss. The good, the great, the good, the not so good. I can, I don't need to collect all those albums, but I do appreciate Kiss.
Yeah, cool,
Very
cool.
deep level. But yeah, no, that's so funny. My friend Jerry will be very excited to hear your comments on that.
Yeah, yeah. And I'm still a fan. Like again, they collapsed hard and long over the last 20 plus years with the fake Ace and the fake Peter and all that. And
Yeah, yeah.
I could go on and on, but like the fact is that their main catalog remains just so interesting to me. And I'm not talking about them as human beings. I think a couple of those guys are kind of shitty, but look, I think I've learned, especially being really into metal, like I've learned to separate the art from the artist. I've really had to.
Yeah.
And so, I just take the parts of Kiss that give me joy and I leave the rest.
Right, right. Well, one of my and this last thing I'll say about Kiss is one of my great regrets is when I was in high school, Peter Criss was no longer in the band. He was living out where I lived in North Jersey.
Mm,
Sadly, I mean, Ace was living in the same area when he passed away. Um,
okay.
and people were like, "Oh yeah," people had known that he had kind of moved into the area, and it's sort of like Ace sightings here and there every once in a while. But anyway, so in high school, Peter Criss. At least I think this is true. I couldn't go into bars at the time, but there was a place called the Cherry Croft Inn, and he would play there. Uh, but he would also give guitar lessons. And, I was like, what? You can, and I never did it. I never sort of, I don't know, had the wherewithal or the money or whatever motivation to just be like, oh my God, I think I can go take, guitar lessons from Peter Criss. Even though,
Guitar? He was a
yeah, I know,
drummer.
weird, even though he's a drummer.
No shit.
That's what people told me. They were like, yeah, he
Wow,
gives
never
guitar
never heard
lessons.
that. I thought I knew everything about Kiss. I guess there's a new one.
I mean, it could be, I could have gotten that information wrong as, my junior year in high school self, but that was the information I had gotten.
That's cool. That's cool.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I was always a little bummed that I didn't sort of follow up on that.
Or even just run into him. That's kind of cool. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
But anyway, so okay, so you have these these things, and you're feeling it, and you knew this thing is different. So when did it go from, something I like, I love, this thing moves me, into something you pursued? I mean, at this point, you are chasing it. I mean, when did this happen? When did all
Well,
of a sudden
yeah,
you wanted to
yeah.
write about it, live it, that sort of thing?
Right about Live It. Well, by that time I had, let's say the early teens, I had been immersed in like fanzines and things like Kerrang from across, the ocean in the UK were coming into, record stores and things. And getting really into metal, getting really into hard rock through FM radio, and then just the early '80s kind of metal explosion, and onward. And then I started reading fanzines, and I would just when I was, I don't know, 14, just compile playlists of my own for no, like, just on paper, like what I was listening to and ranking things. And like I
Hmm.
really had this sense of like, because I'm not super OCD or super anal, but I have elements of that for sure. Um, where I like to rank, I like lists, I like to categorize a little bit.
Hmm.
I certainly I'm a big alphabetizer. My previous partner always made fun of me because I alphabetized our spices. Um, but
Okay.
but but so yeah, maybe I do have a problem. But I
Right.
would I would make these little lists, and then I started like just writing record reviews just because I needed to get it out on paper. I was almost too embarrassed to share it with friends,
So
because I
for
didn't
so
know.
so you're 14 years old,
And I'm writing
thereabout.
on, yeah, and I'm writing on loose leaf paper, about what was it? Probably an early Voivod record. And then I remember when I was about 16 or 17, early, there's a German metal band called Halloween, and I was into their first record, and I wrote a review just on paper. Because I just wanted to express or feel how it felt to express it in that form, right?
Hmm. Yeah.
Um, and so that was the beginning. And then I think my first real attempt or move into the superfan world for real would have been, let me think, in 1988. I'm in college at University of Iowa. I'm just finishing my first year, my freshman year. And I did two things. One, sorry, no, the first thing was, I bought a fanzine from Canada that I really liked, and I wrote the editor and said, if you want anybody to write reviews, I'd love to give it a shot. And I was so naive. I had no idea how things worked. I had no connections. And he wrote to me and said, great. And then I got assigned a couple things. I got assigned a show review like the second Milwaukee Metal Fest in July '88, and
Hmm.
Metallica's "And Justice for All." He let me write on, and
Wow.
some underground things, some more kind of like death and thrash metal kind of stuff. And so I got that assignment. Then I got another assignment with a Minneapolis magazine called Sheet Metal, which was pretty legit. Again, just hey, I write for Anti-Poser. Can I write for Sheet Metal? And sure. And so then they were not paid gigs, but you got every now and then you got a free album. I remember the first couple free records I got. It was just great to just, oh my God, I didn't have to pay for these and I get to write about them and see
Yeah.
and see my name in print. It was a little bit of an ego boost.
Yeah. Yeah.
Never really did it for ego, but let's not lie. It's a fun little boost to see your name in print the first few times. And then the next year, I was still at University of Iowa, sophomore year. I got an offer near the end of that year to take over. Or I knew, a friend of a friend basically said, "Oh, the guy that has the metal show, or the girl I think that had the metal show on Saturday nights at KRUI, which yeah, University of Iowa is a pretty big school and it's got a decent range with its college radio station." I used to listen to the metal show on Saturday nights. They said, "There's an opening. She's leaving. Like, you got to do it." And I'm like, because they knew me, and I was wearing it on my sleeve, and I went for it, and I got it. And that was a blast, man. I had a 3 hour show from 9 to 12 on Saturday night, just a great slot. And I got to learn how to play records. It was even before they were doing a whole lot of CD. I would sometimes play tapes, but mostly records and two turntables. And, I'd have to play the carts. They call them carts, which were like ads or PSAs or whatever. Um, and I did that. And that went on for a couple years, even after I dropped out of college to be in a band. I kept doing it because it was a popular show, and that was it. That at that point, I think I started feeling like, well, I quit college to be in a band. I'm doing this thing at KRUI. I'm writing for some fanzines. I really didn't think about what was coming the next day or the next week. I just kind of just kept doing it, and one thing leads to another, and uh, 5 years later, 3 or 4 or 5 years later, I'm at in Pennsylvania working for Relapse Records. 2 years later, I'm co-editor at Metal Maniacs, newsstand publication. Um, so it just, one thing led to another.
Hmm. Dude, I love that. I love that because now it gives me a timeline to work with. Um, so maybe not so music related, but more kind of life choice related. You found something really early that you loved. You kind of felt compelled to express yourself, even when there was no audience for it. But then obviously you did kind of let people know, like this is a passion of mine. This is something I'm really interested in. And it's turned into this lifelong immersion into a world that you really love.
Yeah.
Someone's listening to this and they're 15 years old or they're 35 years old, or I don't know, whatever, they're 80, I don't know, but they're kind of not quite sure what to do or where to go. Like, is there something in there that you look back and key in on and go, yeah, that I did this right.
Well,
Is there?
yeah, that's a great question. I didn't mean to interrupt you if you
No,
weren't
no, go
finished
ahead,
there.
please. Tell me.
Yeah,
I want to know what you think about that.
yeah. Well, I mean, it's interesting because I've gotten asked, hey, how'd you get to do what you wanted, what you do? I want to do it, but I would never tell somebody to quit college. You know what I mean? Like that disappointed my mother. I knew it was okay. I knew it was right for me at the time, but I would never tell somebody that. And I guess that leads me to the other thing, which is that even though I did follow my heart, and I could tell anybody out there, follow your heart, follow your dreams, all that cliche stuff, but like I'm the living embodiment that I've made my way in life by doing that. It's a little reckless to give anybody else that advice only because I really truly believe that a lot of this is luck. It's just a matter of who you met and who you knew at the time. Because I think about those my friends, my a couple girlfriends. They weren't girlfriends because I wasn't swinging like that. I had a monogamous relationship, but I had these two girls I was friends with, and they were the ones that came up to me and said, "Hey, that DJ at KRUI is leaving. You got to take the job." Like if they had not had just thought of me, or if they hadn't approached me at work when they did that, when I remember it clear as day, Well, maybe I wouldn't have gotten that. And then maybe the fire would have not burned as brightly in me if I had not gotten that or not gone that way, you know. Same thing with what fanzine I ended up writing to, which editor, like, you know, I decided to write and offer my services. Like they, you know, if I had written somebody else, they may have just ignored it. You know what I mean? Who's this hayseed from Iowa writing me? You know, I don't know. So a lot of it is luck. A lot of it's like who you meet, who you know, who's sort of like, because we don't, none of us gets anywhere just by ourselves. There's always somebody that's helped us somewhere along the way. And so, yeah, I can give that advice of follow your heart. That's been very important in my
Mm.
story. But like, you know, it's also been, I've been very lucky to be certain places that are at the right time. Same thing with the Metal Maniacs gig, the best job I'll ever have, the magazine gig. Like, I was going out with a girl. We were long distance at the time. She was in Arizona. I was in Pennsylvania, but she heard about this opening. And she said, "Look, they offered me the gig or an interview, but I just got to Arizona for her job. She was working for a record label out there." She said, "But you should do it." I'm like, "Yeah, I should." I mean, that's a magazine I read when I was a kid in Iowa, you know, or younger. I should do it. I went for it and I got it, you know. But again, you know, like all the passion and all the heart in the world, you know, it led me there in one way, but at the same time, had I not known her, or if she had decided to take the gig instead of me, could be very different. You know, I may not have ever written the books I've written. So it really is a lot of luck. I really do think that it's a lot of like, I don't know about fate, or what you want to call it, but there's just a chain of events that's just probably just random universal stuff that
Mm.
happens to somebody lucky like me.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, yeah.
Well, that's okay. That's an interesting response. I mean, I 100% agree with the part about like when I think about anything that I've accomplished, I mean, I literally take no credit for it. Zero. Um, I didn't, I mean, I just
Well,
don't, right? I mean, without, and I know maybe
well, don't
that's,
go that far because you've had the brains, you've had the wherewithal to do
yeah,
certain
but
things, and
you
you
know
know,
what? I had, great people around me and a fantastic family and,
right.
opportunities. And I guess what I'm getting at is I'm fully aware that the things that I've been able to do, especially the things that I'm most proud of, like, that comes because of, again, family, being amazing, supporting you, making you feel good, pushing you when you need to be pushed, like all those things, and then
Yeah.
and then my friends, and again, so I really do, I'm on board with that. But then the part where you said, you were just lucky, um, that's the part where I'd maybe push back a little bit because while each individual kind of, scenario you described, you're right, it could have gone a different way. But I think the fact that you were expressing yourself publicly, which I think is a difficult thing to do, I think
Mm, mm.
I think it puts people in a very vulnerable position, especially today. I mean, I'm kind of highlighting this because I think there's a lot of people who would like to follow their dream, their heart, their passion, but they're really afraid. They're afraid someone's going to be like, "Oh, that's so cringe," or "That's they're going to get called out for not being cool," or whatever. And I always get really sad about that because I feel like when I hear your story, what I hear is someone who was like really passionate, but also someone who was not afraid to communicate to the world, "This is the thing I'm into." And that seems like it drew people to you and helped to create those opportunities where, I guess luck kind of was on your side. I wonder when I say all that, does that, am I on the right page? Am I
Oh, that
interpreting
that
that
absolutely
correctly?
resonate. That Yeah, that resonates with
Yeah.
me. I mean, I think about, people in general who are lucky. They've pulled something toward themselves. Do you know what I mean?
Mhm.
There's
Yeah.
something that they've pulled toward themselves because they're either good or they worked really hard. I certainly worked hard in terms of just put my nose to the grindstone. And, I put out my own fanzine from 92 to 96, right around I guess the years after I quit the band and left Iowa City. I put out a fanzine and, I had to learn about self-publishing. And I did that with no monetary reward. In fact, I used any profit I made from the meager jobs I had, to fund that. And again, maybe I got lucky because I was putting myself out there. that's really putting yourself out there, send flyers in the mail and the old school sort of like, underground communication, trading tapes and trading zines and stuff. And like in 93, I was very ambitious and I went out to this convention in Burbank, California called the Foundations Forum. And this was a big industry thing for hard rock and heavy metal. And I knew that some fanzine guys would go, people that had enough disposable income to afford a plane ticket to Burbank and go. Well, I could barely afford it, but I did it anyway. And again, I met, Matt from Relapse, who offered me a job about 3 months later. Well, there you go. It's like, so
Mhm.
there's luck because I met Matt that weekend and we got high together and we talked music together, and had I not done that, so I think so I'll meet you halfway. I'll say that it's like very much a combination of ambition and luck.
Mhm.
Again, there's
Yeah.
always luck, right?
Right.
But
Yeah.
sure, I'll accept that my ambition, is part of the reason that I've been able to do the things I've done.
Yeah. No, that's great. I think what's nice about talking to people about the things they love, uh, is this. It's like again, like moments like that, hearing how somebody got to do what they love to do. The path they took, the chances they, were willing to take. Um, I don't know, the way they put themselves out there. I don't know. I just find that very valuable. Um, because there's a lot of people who I think want to do that, you know, and maybe they need to hear somebody else talk about it, give them a little bit more motivation to,
Sure.
kind of just move them off the mark a little bit. I think, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, I don't think
Yeah.
anyone's going to listen. I should say anyone. It wouldn't be I wouldn't anticipate that people are going to, listen to this. And we're going to change their musical tastes drastically. Maybe that'll happen. And if it does, that's amazing. But on the other hand, when people get to, see the world through somebody else's eyes, I think that's the things that can really motivate somebody to do something very special in their own life. That's not at all what we're talking about, So I kind of really
Sure.
love
Yeah.
that.
No, sure. I mean,
Yeah.
right. I remember the first time I encountered what was called a fanzine. Like I
Yeah.
didn't know that kids in their bedroom could do that until I found out that they could and they were doing it. And like I was reading one and I thought, well, this is cool. I could probably do this, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean it is, yeah. That's a really good point.
No, it's awesome. Okay, so let's get into the music. So I've loved this first hour of, kind of just getting to know you a little bit. From I think multiple different angles and perspectives. And now let's get into the music. Now, my understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, is, and I'm not sure if I'm even using the right, I want to use the right term that you're good with, but I would say the music that you often talk about on your podcast is kind of extreme. I mean, is that the right word to,
Sure. Yeah, I mean,
uh,
sure. I'm into all kinds of metal.
okay.
I like metal in its various permutations, but I lean a few different ways. Certainly, there's plenty of melodic stuff I love, but I also really have an affinity for a lot of the stuff that people would call extreme. It's not a word I tend to use only because it just seems so general. But I
Hmm.
know what you're saying, and yes, absolutely. We do. We do talk about a lot of extreme stuff on Radical Research. Then again, King Crimson is one of our favorite bands, and they were, I think, considered extreme in their time in
Yeah.
the progressive rock world, doing things that were abrasive and just unusual and strange and weird. But yeah, definitely, yeah, we can talk extreme, sure.
Cool. Well, maybe you can do this for me. Connect the dots, right? So what I mean by that is when I was younger, I remember being, I don't know, I was certainly in grade school, and I saw Rock You Like a Hurricane, the video by the
Yeah,
Scorpions. And I was like, oh my God, this is amazing, So
yeah,
I remember that being a little bit of a gateway, So before that, watching some videos, and maybe it's like, a little more like synth poppy kind of, top 40. And then, you see something like the Scorpions, you go, oh my God, right? And so Scorpions, then, Motley Crue, then, I hear Metallica and okay. But at some point, that's kind of about as heavy as I got. It
Yeah.
was sort of
Yeah.
Metallica, a little bit of Slayer, Anthrax, but even that was kind of really on the edge for me. So
Okay.
when I
Okay.
say
Okay.
connect the dots, that's what I mean.
Yeah,
Like,
sure, sure.
give me the
Well,
connect the dots, and then hold, and then connect those. Like, explain to me how those dots get connected when you get into that really heavy music. Like, what drew you to that,
sure,
segment?
sure.
Yeah.
I think that, and I wouldn't have been able to articulate this at the time, but when I was listening to Kiss, a lot of the stuff I liked by Kiss was the heavier, darker stuff. Parasite, Watching You, 100,000 Years, God of Thunder, Almost Human. That element of them just spoke to me in a way that some of their other stuff didn't. And I love the melodic, beautiful, Paul led sort of Kiss too. But there was this deeper dive into like darkness and extremity with that. So then that leads to, I think, the first thing that would have been attractive to me outside of Kiss, that had some of those elements, was Judas Priest. Like Screaming for Vengeance album, and some of their '70s stuff, like Hellbent for Leather era, like some of that, and plus, with Kiss and then Priest, I started to really get into playing and like listening to if not virtuosity, then certainly like mastering your instrument and just having character. So, Priest and then Iron Maiden was the next logical step. And then it wasn't long before Metallica. And I got into Metallica with Kill 'Em All. Like I was already on the cusp of like, this new band is being talked about a lot. I want to check it out. And the first time I ever heard Kill 'Em All, I really kind of had to acclimate. I'm not gonna say I
Yeah.
didn't like it, but the palm muting sort of stuff, with the right hand, it was abrasive and it was just something to get used to. But I remember after maybe this third listen, I acclimated and it just hit so hard. And then you said a
Mhm.
little bit of Slayer. I went a lot of Slayer. Like I was, because it was, again, it was it felt like the next logical step with
Yeah.
Metallica was Slayer.
Yeah.
And for me, all these bands, and then the ones that came after, Bathory, Voivod, the more extreme stuff of the time, and in thrash metal, what was called thrash metal or death metal of the day, even the band Death, their first album came out in '87. Like that was also attractive to me because it did the world building exercise that I loved with Kiss so much. It started to push boundaries the way Metallica were with in terms of speed and technique. Um, and it was creative. Like I felt all these bands were so different from one another, that there was this abounding creativity in metal in the '80s. And I was definitely driven toward a lot of the underground or more extreme stuff. Now, I loved Queensryche. I still do. I love a lot of the melodic stuff. Fates Warning. I wrote a book about Fates Warning. Like I'm really into that stuff as well. Um, but there was really something so special about this exploding underground scene. And I don't know if I've answered your question about connecting the dots so much, but I definitely feel like each evolution in metal at that time was just these bands pushing it further and further, and just how far are we going to go until we go off the cliff? And it was exciting, and it was international. There's bands from Sweden and England and Brazil and like Japan, and it just of course the U.S., Canada. It was exciting, and I'm really glad I grew up in the '80s and I got to see Metallica at the height of um, their first period with Cliff Burton. I got to see Slayer on the Rain and Blood tour. I got to see, all these bands kind of at the height and be in the record stores when the new records were coming out. So yeah, and once the '90s hit and death metal was a huge thing, I was interested in that. Um, Things got avant-garde in the '90s, especially in Norway, and I went with that. There's just a lot of constant evolution in metal that kept me interested. At the same time, by my mid 20s, I'm rediscovering my Beatles roots, because when I started taking guitar lessons as a Kiss fan, Beatles was a thing that we were taught. fucking love the Beatles. I mean, they're not overrated. I want to punch people in the face who say they're overrated. So,
Oh, that's
um,
a ridiculous
but you
statement.
hear
I
that. You
mean,
hear
come
people
on.
say this. You hear
No,
people say
well,
that. You know,
yeah.
love Radiohead, one of my top 10 bands, Radiohead. So it's like, I have expanded my horizons. I love progressive rock so much. I'm a complete nerd for a lot of it, especially the 70s era. Um, but yeah, that's for me, that's sort of the latter step in terms of getting into metal deeply
Mm.
and following all the sort of extreme permutations of it.
Yeah, no, that I mean that certainly it helps. Again, the connect the dot thing is perfect, right? Again, okay, started off with Kiss, or actually if we go back to, the Seasons in the Sun song, we can kind of
Absolutely.
connect those
Yeah,
dots. But there
yeah.
is a moment, and this is I guess what you did talk about to a degree, but I'd love to hear more, or maybe there is no more to it, but was it just kind of one step up the ladder, getting into this sort of darker, heavier music? Or, I mean, I guess that has to be a part of it, but it feels to me like, let's face it, especially in the 80s, late 80s, being a Metallica fan was pretty accepted.
Yeah,
Liking Def Leppard, getting into Queensryche, like, there wasn't anyone who was going to look at you kind of sideways, like, wait, what?
right,
What
right.
do you? But you start to talk about, Dark Throne and, kind
Sure,
of
sure.
I mean, to most people, very obscure bands.
Yeah,
And then when you hear kind of you hear the sound, most people, right, are going to have a certain reaction to it. And so I wonder, is there anything about I don't know that outsider is the right word, but that is not mainstream at all. Is
no,
is there
no.
something about that that's attractive to you? Or really, no, that just never played into it. It just always was kind of one step up the ladder. And I guess all of the things that surround the music are irrelevant to you. Or was there something about that you were drawn to? You go, no, no, I like this community that's smaller but intense. And yeah, what do you
Yeah,
think about all
yeah.
that?
That's a really good question, man. That's a really good question. And it can be attacked a number of different ways. And there is an attraction, I'll admit, to like, well, I mean, Metallica, I brought Metallica to my high school. Like nobody, or even junior high, nobody really knew about them. I just happened to be
Hmm.
the first guy to buy Kill 'Em All. A little bit same thing with Slayer. And like there was this thing of like they're my band, and then they're our band. Like when my group of friends got into them, well, it's our band, and I never would have thought Metallica would have gotten as big as they did with the Black Album. I never,
Hmm.
but I like the Black Album, and
Yeah.
that's to me the last great album they did. And I love everything between No Life Till Leather demo and Black Album. I think that's one of the most perfect arcs of any band, metal or
Hmm.
otherwise. But I
Yeah.
never thought that my band would become everybody else's band. But I never begrudge them that either. I never get like, bummed out I know people, there's a band called Opeth from Sweden. I don't know if you've heard of them, but they were this cult band for so long. And then they just broke out and they play big venues everywhere. And some people turn their back on them. Oh, I never listen to Opeth anymore. It was because they weren't their band anymore. It was
Yeah.
everybody else's band. I find that kind of shallow. I think you should judge it only on the music that's coming out. So yeah, in one sense, it's totally attractive. The obscure stuff is very attractive to me. But then I go discover some obscure stuff and I find it to be crap. Just because it's obscure doesn't mean it's good.
Right.
I've
Right.
never lived by that sort of maxim, but I do find that attractive, and I'll tend to check out something only a couple people are talking about versus something everybody's talking about. Because
Mm.
usually if I don't know something that everybody's talking about, I'm usually disappointed. And not, I use this sort of metric of like, look at what sells the most in terms of beer, Miller Lite. Well, it's crap. Look what look what movies are the biggest hits. They're usually crap, in my opinion. And
Hmm.
so a lot of the same thing happens with music a lot of the time. So I am definitely motivated by maybe things are a little less mainstream. At the same time, like I love to I don't love to. I just like to stay grounded and just check things out for their own sake. And if I respond to them, great. Doesn't matter what the obscurity level is or even the popularity level, you know.
Hmm.
So, I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Okay, so you talked about a bunch of different types of music that you like, but your podcast does kind of focus on, again, more what most people would say extreme. Um, Now, is death metal a good umbrella term for or is that not a good, like,
Just too limiting, too
okay.
limiting. Are you
Well,
talking about in terms of what radical research covers?
yeah, well, what really the heart of my question is, you've mentioned a bunch of different genres that you enjoy and you like and you listen to maybe and have written about. But then you have this podcast that does seem to focus on, a little, it gets more narrow, I think,
Yeah,
at least to some degree. And I'm wondering, what is the umbrella, that the things that you cover in that podcast would be like, how do I speak about this music, to ask you questions,
sure.
and why that umbrella as opposed to
Okay.
something
Yeah.
else?
Well, first of all, the guy who does the podcast with me is one of my dearest friends. He lives down in Savannah, Georgia. His name is Hunter Ginn. He's now the drummer for a band called Agalok from Portland, and they just meet up for the shows they do. But yeah, Savannah boy. He and I, when I met him in 2001, we had the most uncanny parallels and intersections with music that of anybody that I've ever met. Of all the hundreds and hundreds and maybe even thousands of people I've met and talked music with, he and I liked so many obscurities in the same way. Um, our main interests are the same, whether it's Beatles, prog rock, metal, whatever. Um, and so that formed a friendship. And then we decided to essentially do a podcast about 8 years ago. And we defined it by basically saying adventures in exceptional music. But the sort of thing you don't see there is that we're really trying to cover things that are either left field or forgotten about that we think deserve another notice. Um, Things that we're always on the fringes that we want to bring back. I mean, whether it's an Austrian band called Disharmonic Orchestra that nobody liked back then, that almost nobody likes now, that we love, we're
Yeah.
we're going to do it. But I think our 13th or 14th or 15th episode, we covered how Rick Rubin changes metal bands like Danzig and Trouble and Slayer. Kind of like he comes in and he produces and just so we like to t- talk thematically as well, about things. But it's basically when we started the podcast, even 8 years ago, I was like, oh man, just what everybody needs is another podcast about music. There were literally, I think I did some research, and it was like I came across the figure of about 30,000 podcasts in the world about music. And it's like, well, if we're going to do a podcast, well, we need to offer something unique. And Hunter and my tastes are quite unique uh, and specific, but also at the same time, kind of broad. We are somebody called our well of reference points nasty and humiliating, and they said this as a compliment
Okay. That's
because we
cool.
can we can talk a good deal about a good deal of things,
Hmm.
especially when we team up because he's got even more of a jazz and like eclectic avant-garde background, and I've got my specialties, and but that was the whole idea, was really to cover things that aren't necessarily extreme, just more obscure, left field, forgotten, need to come back, that sort of stuff. Not the mainstream stuff. I mean, we love Slayer, we love Opeth, but we're probably not going to do shows on them because everybody else in metal world is doing podcast episodes on those bands.
Hmm.
So if we do that, we try to attack it from a different angle, But yeah, that's essentially the point. And it sounds like it'd be so specialized that there'd be almost no audience for it. But man, we have we have a pretty big audience, and a lot of people just binge the hell out of us. And even people that find us now, I just got an email from a guy yesterday. He's like, I don't know how I didn't find this podcast, but I'm going to binge all of them. He's like, I've done 10. I got 130 to go. I'm like, sweet. That's the kind of people we want, you know? So we
Yeah.
have carved our own little niche with this thing too. It's just kind of crazy that I got involved in yet another thing that, you know, gets me out there and takes up all of my time, but it's awesome. You know, I have fun with it.
Yeah. No, it's incredible. Yeah, I mean, I would, just I listen to some, in between, kind of talking to you at baseball and then, us doing this today.
Yeah,
And there is obviously a fairly wide variety, of topics and bands. And so, maybe this is more a collection question. And when I say collection, I mean, let's imagine your collection is intact, the way it was,
sure.
pre-fire, right? Things that you had, kind of really spent time, putting together. Um, and so I wonder the things that you kept for your collection and also the topics and the bands that you put onto your podcast. I mean, besides this element of obscurity, right? Because you said, some things that can be, kind of, yeah, it's really rare and nobody knows about it, but it's also terrible, right? You're not talking about that. What do you think
No.
it is? Like, what's the thing that makes it worth talking about or keeping? Is it, I don't know, is it the
Only
energy, the
yeah.
emotion, the philosophy? Like, what are you most drawn to that says, yeah, yeah, this is something that we want to dedicate, an hour, 2 hours, a book, to write about.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's all of what you said, all those elements that you mentioned. But really, the answer is very, very simple, and we've talked about it already, which is what really moves me to that deep,
Mm.
transformative place.
Okay.
If that band has done that, and they've, I always like bands who surprise you every album. I don't like a band to stay the same every album. It happens a lot and it's boring to me. I appreciate when an artist is truly an artist, which is change, right? So that's one thing in common that all these artists have that we're covering probably is just this degree of change or offering the world something that nobody else has. Um, and that's it, man. If it moves us, and Hunter and I have to agree generally to do a show. I mean, we have yet to do a real point counterpoint. We've joked about doing it because it's kind of novel that we would disagree, but we have places where we veer off and fork off and don't agree. But it works better when we are enthused about something. And thankfully, and this is why it works, thankfully, he and I, every time I come up with an idea, he's like, yeah, that's it.
Hmm.
Of course, and it's just because he's been moved by these things in a similarly impactful way as I have. And that's it. That's all that really matters, um, is that. And why do they do that? Well, all the things you said, emotion, being transportive, creativity is just fascinating to us. Maybe performance level, imagination. I love bands with great imagination. It's a ballsy thing to go out and do something like. There's a band called Celtic Frost from Switzerland who made their waves in the '80s, early '90s, and changed dramatically from album to album. I mean, pissed off shit tons of their audience by the third album, and I love that sort of stuff. Again, it may not always work, but it's worked for me enough that we built a podcast around it. So, yeah,
Cool. So you play guitar, yeah?
I play my primary instrument would be bass.
Okay, okay. And are you
When I'm
still?
when I'm practicing, when I'm good, um, and especially when I'm with other people, I can be a pretty good bass player. I'm pretty happy to say that. Uh, I don't play now because I lost equipment in the fire, and I haven't bought it. I haven't rebought it since because I just haven't had any desire. Especially, the last few years I haven't been playing with anybody. I just never really got into the local scene here, and um, I got a little tired of playing for myself. Or I was going to say with myself, but that sounds a little
Mhm.
silly and perverted. Um,
Family
but
show.
yeah, family show, G-rated. Yeah. So, but yeah, I've been playing some kind of guitar, or, I started on guitar lessons when I was quite young. I wanted to be Ace Frehley, like a lot of kids picked up guitar because of him.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
of course I'm disillusioned. I get to the first guitar lesson and we're playing Hail Hail, the gang's all here, and I'm like, man, this is not shock me. This is not what I wanted.
Right.
Um, but I stuck with it, and then like a few years later, my high school jazz band needed a bass player, and I was like, well, it's got two less strings, and how hard can it be? And I found out it was very difficult, especially jumping into jazz. But it was a great trial by fire, and I've been just enthralled with the bass ever since. And really, honestly, man, a lot of times when I listen, my ear will go to the great bass player if there is one. I really enjoy the tone. Yeah, I respond very much to bass guitar.
Cool. No, I love that. Okay, so the reason I just wanted to verify that I thought that was I knew you played something and I wasn't quite sure the level. So as you talked about, like one of the things that you're really drawn to about your the bands you talk about or the people you talk about in your podcast is something unique, right? There's something unique about them that
Oh,
kind of.
sure.
So what I find unique about you is that you play music, you intensely listen to music, and then you also communicate to other people about music, right? You talk about it, you write about it. What's the difference between these three things? Like
Yeah,
what
yeah.
what's itches are being scratched, when you're expressing yourself in those different ways. Um, I don't know I don't know if having three of those, initially I was going to ask just like the difference between listening and talking about music, but then I was like, oh yeah, but you play music too.
Yeah, I think listening and playing are more symbiotic than talking about it, right?
Okay.
I just think it's very natural for us to talk about the things we like, whether, and now with social media as some people's platform, it's everywhere to just talk, 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 podcast, talk, talk, talk. It's great. It's absolutely great. It's how we relate to each other in terms of our passions. But I think that there's a symbiotic nature between playing music and listening. And I've always known that, but I learned it somewhat recently when about 5 years ago, I hadn't picked up a bass in a long time. It was just in the attic. I don't think I had an amp anymore. Um, I had done some projects a few years prior to that with a friend of mine that were more arty kind of projects that were one of them we played live at a film festival in Syracuse University. Just really different stuff. But I didn't play much after that because again, I like to collaborate. I'm done. I don't like to play with myself anymore. I just like, or to records. I like to collaborate, and there just wasn't any of that happening. So anyway, I stopped for a while, and then when I picked it back up, I think in those 5 years, I had become an even better and more intent listener. And by that, I mean I'm always trying to become a better listener. Some of my best friends have taught me to be a better listener. And what I mean by that is, the surrender required, the analysis that you can get into, the you can be completely scientifically analytical about music at the same time that it's taking you out into space. You know what I mean? Like, so I really like, I think listening is something to work on. Um, so I became a better and better listener, and when I picked up the bass again, it came so quick, and I really, really think it was because I had been listening even more intently than ever. There was a period of time from about 2013 to 2017 when I wasn't married. I was living here in Greensboro and just working for a record label, a prog rock record label at the time. And I would listen probably more than I ever have before or since. And that was my real step up in terms of becoming what I think is a really elevated listener. And so when I approached the bass after that period of time, something clicked in a way that I was like, shit, I really have gotten better by just studying music. Do you know what I
Mm.
mean?
Yeah, yeah.
It was weird. I never heard of that happening to people, but I'm sure it does. But like it was really strange. And I talked to a couple of musician friends of mine. They're like, yeah, I can see that. And you're going to find this crazy because I'll never be the greatest baseball player, but I was not a great baseball player when I was young. Like I was kind of terrible. Like I either had no ambition for it or just didn't have any physicality for it. I've been a lot better as an adult. And I just think I've watched so much baseball that I've learned certain things. Again, and glove position when you're catching a grounder. I learned
Yeah.
that by watching and understanding the game. And so that symbiotic element between playing and listening, I think they're very intertwined. I hope that anybody who's a big fan who listens a lot at least tries to play music. Not everybody has the aptitude, but I think it helps you understand a whole lot about what's happening when you're receiving music from other people.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, totally. Okay, so those two almost go, listening and playing feel like they go in the same basket.
Kind of the
And
same
then,
basket, exactly. And I again, I haven't played for a year and a half, but I've been listening. Once I acclimated to listening again, and it took me maybe 6 weeks after the fire. Um, I've been listening a ton, and so it's not like I need to play to listen or to listen to play, but I do. Yeah, they are definitely, I think, part of that same basket.
okay. And then the communication part, different basket, related, obviously, but
Related, less visceral, right? It's
yeah.
less the actual thing, right? Because like I said, I never get tired of listening to music. I do get tired of, depends on who I'm talking to. I love talking with you about it. I love talking with my best friends about it. But there are times I've been in social situations where I'm like, I don't want to talk about music with you anymore, man. It's just this, it's the same shit. We keep talking about the same stuff, and so I can get tired of talking about it. I can get tired of communicating about it, and I've done my share. So I feel like there's there's moments where I do have to tap out, you know.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, what's really interesting, as you know, I mean, being a podcaster and, just being around people doing something that you find interesting, so you're talking and you're asking questions. What I find really interesting about our conversation is, initially I kind of thought we were going to talk more about the heavier, more extreme kind of music that you were into. Um, but and we really haven't talked about that very much. But I think what we have talked about in just sort of a circular way is how someone can engage with music that's not just picking up the record. Now, picking up the record is really important and really
Oh yeah.
fantastic. And I want to
Yeah.
hear about that next. Like, I want to,
Sure.
my next question is like, tell me about your listening routine, your setup. Because I too, I mean, I don't want, I mean, I love sound, right? So sound and space and architecture and how all these things work together and, sitting in a chair and closing my eyes and turning the lights off, right? So I want to
Yeah.
hear what your routine is.
Sure.
But my point is that if somebody listens to this, uh, I think they're getting a really nice roadmap with a lot of different kind of ways to get you somewhere,
Mhm.
all centered around this idea of music, right? If you're thinking of like, well, how can I engage with music in a way that's just not listening, and again, I'm not saying that to minimize listening, but I think people, when they feel that attraction, they want to, and they go, okay, well, yeah, I could join a band, but yeah, and that's not easy, right? I mean, learning an instrument, maybe you don't have the time, maybe you don't have the resources, right? Maybe you don't have the aptitude, right? Then sometimes people just kind of they shut it down at that point. But you're talking
Yeah.
about like talking about it, writing about it, creating, zines to engage with it. I think that's really amazing. I think that's really fantastic. So I'm loving the direction of this conversation because of that.
Well, well, I am too, but I'm a little worried that we haven't talked much about collecting because you approached me first saying I have this podcast about collections. I'm
Oh, we'll
like,
get there. And if we don't, it's fine. No, but this is the podcast. This is what I always try to prep people. I'm
that's
like,
fine. I've had a blast talking. It's again, I can talk about this stuff a lot
oh,
all day. So
yeah. I mean, anyone well, anyone's listened to more than one episode, they understand that. Uh,
gotcha.
there is a long and winding road to get to. This is not a how-to. This is
Right,
definitely not like,
right.
oh. I'm trying to learn how to do this. No, that's not it. I
Yeah.
just think people are real, like, if, like it's what I just said before. You have an incredibly unique perspective, and that's what I want to hear about, right? There's lots of
Gotcha.
people
Fair
who can
enough.
tell
Okay.
us about how to collect or talk about
Yeah.
values and how to store things. But, that's not interesting. What's interesting is you and how you engage with music. And that's what's so kind of brilliant about this conversation.
Okay. Cool. Yeah.
Um, so, along those lines, tell me about your listening routine. How do you kind of ingest, you're not eating a sandwich, right? You're listening to this thing that's going to nourish you.
Oh,
Um,
look,
how do you
yeah,
do it?
yeah. Well, I mean, look, I'm not like militaristic about it in the sense of only doing it one way. I have my favorite way, which I'll get to in just a second. I can eat a sandwich and listen to music. I can do dishes or cook a meal while listening to music. I sometimes will fall asleep um, with headphones on and to an album. Um, I will listen in the car. None of these ways are to me the ideal or most rewarding ways, but they're a way to ingest and relate with it and just spend time with it. Then we get to what I consider kind of real listening. And I didn't really know I guess when I grew up, or as a younger kid, I was around music, and it seemed very social. It was in the living room, the record players in the living room, or people were watching live music together. Um, but I very early kind of um, discovered that listening alone by myself without distraction in the dark or a dimly lighted room was absolutely the best thing ever.
Hmm. Yeah.
And so I did that a lot, and I would I just did it all the time, and so I've designed my life like every place I've ever lived, and the two women I've shared domestic situations with, they have to understand that I need a room. I might need two rooms at this point for my collection and then the hi-fi. But like, um, the best thing ever is that the music room where I sit down, again, like a lot of us do, I suppose, a lot of us complete nerds anyway, sit down, have a few selections ready, or just wing it, see where I go, um, get the atmosphere right, make sure I have no distractions, put the phone away for sure. And I have yet in my hi-fi setup, I have yet to get a streamer. I only stream through the phone, and that's for walking and for going to bed or whatever. But in this situation, I have a turntable, I have a CD player, I have floor standing speakers, and I have a great amp. I'm into integrated amps. I like sort of half solid state, half tube. I think I
Hmm.
get kind of best of both worlds with that sound.
Okay.
Um, and and that's it. And a decent noise reduction sort of power source, and I go and I sit, and I generally will listen to albums all the way through as they're intended to be. I rarely skip songs unless there's something I just can't stand. Some ugly duckling on some album I otherwise love. Um, Sometimes I'll have fun. Sometimes I'll go through. I have a very small 7-inch collection that survived, but I might have a night where I do like 8 or 9 7-inches and then a couple EPs. Just kind of shake it up and like just volley back and forth between CD and vinyl. But I try to be very still. I try to be just very, very aware, and that's what I was talking about earlier in terms of being a better listener. Was like I try to just really work on submission and quieting the mind so
Mm.
that that thing can come in. Because a lot of the music I do listen to, whether it's extreme metal or progressive rock with 20-minute long songs, like a lot of it is to me music that requires a lot of concentration to really get the best out of it.
Hmm.
So that's my ideal listening atmosphere or aesthetic, I guess, if that answers your question.
Yeah, yeah, no, totally.
Yeah.
Is there not to get too technical, but I am curious myself. any whether you have them or maybe they're grails for you? Is there a set of speakers and or amplifier that you are just like, yeah, that's it. I can't wait until I have.
Yeah,
No, no, I listen to,
yeah.
what are you listening to or what do you want to be listening to?
My speakers that I had before the fire were Monitor Audio, and that's a UK company. At one time, they were endorsed by Tony Iommi from Black Sabbath, one of my very favorite bands.
Cool.
Um, Monitor Audio, really good company. And then after the fire and all that, I rebought a pair of the same. So that's my favorite speaker. I've just found it works for the variety of things that I listen to. Seems to be able to handle some of the intensities and then some of the delicate elements of, say, progressive rock or whatever. Um, and then an amp, I do love, like I said, the integrated solid state and tube. Um, I've been using Luxman, which is a Japanese company, um, but I really prefer Rogue, which I think they're based in Pennsylvania. And Rogue amps, man, whether it's the Pharaoh or the Phoenix, they just have this thing that works so, it's like they made it for me. They made it for my
Hmm.
collection. Look them up, Rogue. And yeah, it's more expensive hi-fi gear, but it's also stuff that's attainable. Like I'm not a rich man. I never have been. I have um, definitely gotten way more into quality gear as I've gotten older and as I can afford it. I, for a couple years, had a subscription to Stereophile magazine just to learn more. Because once I started making upgrades to my system, I was like, my God, I'm hearing new things in this stuff that I've heard 300 times. Um, my favorite album of all time is Rush's Moving Pictures. And every time I upgrade, which is less frequently these days, but every time I do, whether it's an amp or a turntable or speakers or even speaker cable, I will put that on because I tend to hear things in that majestic, perfect production or nuances or just more shape, just a little bit more shape. It's amazing, and that's fun. That's a lot of fun. And I also like to listen to with headphones sometimes. I prefer open air, but headphones um, work really well, especially if you are living with somebody who doesn't appreciate hearing Creator at 10:30 at night.
Right, right.
Um, but yeah, yeah.
Okay. So what's your preference? The world is your oyster. Are you listening to vinyl? Are you listening to a CD or, the highest
Yeah,
quality stream you can
yeah.
get? What is
Definitely not the highest quality stream, only because I haven't interfaced with that in the hi-fi room yet.
Mhm.
I will probably get a player at some point, but doesn't that involve a phone?
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't have to, but you know.
It often does,
Yeah, yeah,
which
yeah.
is which I'm not into in that experience. It's a rule of mine, like no food, no clocks, no phones.
Yeah,
Um, Beer, sure.
yeah.
Any drug of your choice, sure. But certainly not a phone. But I'll get there. I'll get there. So not streaming, but I'm cursed because I love CD and vinyl equally for very different reasons. But I
Okay.
I love both formats so much.
Talk about that. Give us
Yeah,
a little
well, I
bit of
mean,
why is that?
well, vinyl has all those things that have made it have a comeback, which I think, you can talk about the extra musical things like artwork, packaging, something to really truly hold in your hand. It's bigger, obviously, than CDs. Um, but it does have, given the right gear and the right pressing and all that, it has that warmth of analog that you just aren't going to get anywhere else. I absolutely love it. I also love how visceral it is. I love that a turntable is basically fighting physics. It doesn't really make a whole lot of sense if you're looking at it from a physics standpoint. Um, that needle moving toward the center and just you tend to lose a little quality near the label if it's not pressed, if it's not cut right. But and I even like to hear a little bit of that surface noise. I mean,
Mhm.
ideally you want to cut it out as much as you can, but I like the visceral quality of it. It's just I don't know, man. I can understand why it came back. For me, it never left, and I was always amused to see it go away and then come back. But it's cool as long as young kids are buying vinyl and excited, man. It's awesome.
Yeah, totally.
It's great, and I love this is why I love going to see Hip Patrick at Hippo here in Greensboro. Is like there's always people in there, and there's a lot of kids, enthused about vinyl, and I just love just being the fly on the wall and seeing that happen. So that's the vinyl thing. The CD. Oh, by the way, I don't really care about vinyl colors. I know a lot of people get into like all the colors and the marbles. If I get that, that's fine.
Yeah.
White vinyl, I absolutely love. Like I'm kind of crazy for white vinyl. I just think
Hmm.
it's like that's that negative image sort of appeal, maybe. I don't know.
Okay, cool.
I think it's sharp. But I don't care. I just want a good pressing. I want a good cut. I want it to just be as good as it can be. Um, CDs, I find there's equal collectability with them. Maybe I don't know if it's my age. I was kind of late to adopt CDs at age 22 was when I first decided. Well, I remember getting what was it, Soundgarden's Bad Motor Finger, and let me think. There was something about it that I was like, oh, I see. The CD buyer gets something else. It might have been a packaging thing. It might have been an extra song. That was when like a lot of bonus songs were coming out on CD that you wouldn't get on the vinyl.
Yeah.
It may not have been that record, but it was something. And I was like, okay, I guess I gotta do it. I guess I gotta get a CD player. And then I just fell in love. I do like the crispness of it. I think there are certain Japanese audiophile CDs that are mastered in such a way, and I don't know how they do it. I can't tell you the technicalities of it, but they sound so otherworldly. They sound
Hmm.
so multidimensional, um, that it's quite the experience that you're not going to get with vinyl because vinyl has these sort of built-in imperfections that make it charming, whereas CD is about that perfection, and not cold perfection. I just want to hear the music reproduced as truthfully as it can be. And so, I've gotten into that world, of various audiophile type CDs. Again, they're often too expensive to afford, and I lost most of mine, but thankfully I've reacquired some through either gifts or just buying a few that I used to have. But man, they just sound so good. It doesn't have to be the Japanese ones. I mean, I think certain newer pressings of a lot of things on CD sound fantastic. So um, big fan.
Hmm.
I want to tell you a little sidebar story. Conan O'Brien is good friends with Jack White, and I was listening to Conan's podcast at one point. Conan and I are on a first name basis. That's why I said Conan. Um, no, and so and Jack White is of course known as this vinyl guy. Like he's got his own label, he's got his own like record club and all this stuff. So you'd think that you'd go to his house and it'd be all vinyl, 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 vinyl. Conan told a story about going over to Jack White's house once, and he's showing him his turntable and his system and all the vinyl records he's got and all this stuff. He's got some CDs over here, and um, they're talking about a particular album. And Conan goes, "Well, let's listen to that." And Jack White goes, "Great." And he reaches for the CD and puts a CD in. And Conan's like, "We're not going to listen to the record?" He's like, "No, no, no. This CD sounds way better than the record." you know? And that's kind of how I feel sometimes, right? I feel that it's gotten a bad rap. It's not cool anymore. I think a lot of people think that CD is uh, obsolete, but it's not. It's not.
Yeah, no, I mean, it does seem like people are getting back into it.
Yeah, well, sure. You see it now at Barnes and Noble. Hippo's starting to carry them. I mean, there's definitely always going to be a market for it. It's smaller, of course, than it would be 20, 30 years ago, but that's fine.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the prices are great. And I know for
Hmm.
the
Hmm.
real, the super high quality audiophile, limited press, that stuff is still crazy expensive. But,
Oh yeah,
you pick up a, whatever, pick your, Led Zeppelin album, get it on vinyl, get it on CD, and it's probably, you know, you probably get the CD for like $2, right? $3, maybe,
exactly. And
maybe less, right?
yeah, yeah. Well, and vinyl, I think music is always more valuable than what we ever pay for it. But the fact
Yeah.
is, look, new records are like $40 for a
Yeah.
single LP. It's gotten a little crazy. And, if you can find a used CD or even new version of it, it's going to cost you definitely half of that, if not less. So
Yeah,
There
no,
is
totally. Yeah,
there is
no, I get it. There's good reasons for both. And well, shout out to Patrick over at Hippo.
there.
That's a great record store. Patrick's awesome. I'll tell you one of the things I love about that store is, and it's why like I'm totally cool buying stuff, sight unseen, on whatever, you post them online. Stuff's always in good shape. You know what I mean? Like you're never, so there's good stuff, but you're never afraid of like, kind of getting an album being like, oh man, that's not what I thought it was going to be. So, not all record shops are like that. And I appreciate that very much about Hippo.
Oh yeah, for sure, for sure.
Yeah. Okay, so we're getting close, I guess to the end. So just a few things before we wrap it up. And I don't know if you actually talked about this but I want to clarify. Has podcasting changed the way you listen to music? So similar to the way you listen to music helped you, maybe change the way you play. Do you think talking about music so intensely to a really large audience has changed the way you then listen to music?
I think so. I think so in the way that writing used to change the way I listened. I think I've kind of flattened out there. I don't think, I'm not writing as much as I used to, and I don't think it's going to help me as a listener anymore.
Hmm.
But, but, yes, I have found that about podcasting. That's kind of yeah, that's what I do more actually, really, quantitatively these days than writing. And it has. In fact, uh, Hunter will mention something in our conversations that'll lead me to something I maybe didn't know, or we'll get feedback from somebody saying, "Hey, you guys talked about this. Well, this is related, or you should really check this out." So I have gotten a lot of. I was swamped. In fact, I'm still swamped in recommendations by listeners. I keep a running thing on my phone to of things to check out, but um, I think because of the fire and even to this day, a year and a half later, I'm less interested in checking out as much new stuff than I used to be. I
Hmm.
think I want the comfort of something familiar, but I'm always going to be adventurous, so I'm always checking stuff out. So in that sense, in terms of exposure, it has opened me up to things I might not have known probably. Um, as just a listener, it has also changed a little bit because Hunter and I play snippets. We never play full songs. Um, we play snippets of things that we're looking at. And I like kind of, obviously that's not how we listen. We don't listen to just, a little bit of a song. We don't do it ADD style. But for the format of the podcast, that's how we do it. And I have found myself really focusing in on even more on certain micro aspects, maybe because we snippet things out and we look at, yeah, highlights of a certain song or passage or something. Um, so it's changed in that way, which I've found a little bit distracting sometimes. Sometimes I'm like, ooh, that's a neat little snippet, but it's not how I really want to come out of the listen. I want to hear these things in their wholeness, right, in their totality. Um, but it has changed, and it's been a lot of fun. And um, yeah, I think any endeavor like this that's just really passionate and constant. We've been doing this for 8 years. I think it's going to change how you relate to the main subject, right?
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, because I'm thinking about my own um experiences with space and sound, but I mean space in particular because that's what I teach, right? So I teach the design of spaces. And
Wow.
sometimes that's,
Okay.
yeah, I mean, I'm an architect and I teach, you know, uh, students how to create space, make space, communicate with space. But part of that, of course, is I have to explain my experiences with space. And I think that was one of the things that I found most interesting about starting to teach was that there's a responsibility for me to, teach in the most effective manner possible. And, part of that is getting people like, kind of excited and passionate and, kind of into the thing you're into. But there is a large part of it is being able to dissect and distill down, why I'm responding to a space in a specific way, whether it's good or bad, right? So I can't just go into a space and just feel it emotionally. I mean, I
Okay.
could, but I have to translate that into words so that when I'm in the classroom, I can say like, yeah, this is exactly what I was feeling and why, right? And so that's what I
Yeah.
was thinking about with your podcast is, when you're sitting down and you got your beer and the lights are off and you're listening and you're just kind of taking that thing in. If you're never going to talk about that on your podcast, that's one thing. But if you're going to talk about it, that's what I was kind of getting at. Like, I wonder, when you're sitting in that chair, you're like, well, this listen is for the podcast. The next one's going to be for me to just, kind of go swimming in the deep end of this album.
Oh yeah, yeah. No, yeah, I definitely make a distinction between uh, we'll call it research. I already know my subject pretty well, but like when I'm like thinking about, well, what are the snippets we're going to play and what are the highlights we want to like draw out? That's a very different sort of listen. But it's also been fun. Like I really like that. And because Hunter and I have never lived in the same town, but we are so bonded by music and other aspects of life. We we use this as time to listen to music, granted, in snippet form, in 2 minute snippets, but it's still fun. Um, and it's really enhanced our friendship as well. And I'm kind of going off on a tangent there because we're not talking about friendship, but it's really changed that and really helped that. But I also feel the responsibility to our crowd. We have an audience now, and um, I I want to be able to back up what I'm saying. So if I'm listening to something that's going to be a subject of a future podcast, I think I've gotten even more deeply analytical about certain things. And that's fine because it's fun for me. It's not work. It's not study necessarily. It's just fun. And yeah, I'm always it's always fascinating to me how fresh it remains.
Yeah, that's all. And no, it's great. It's great to hear that. When a couple quick ones here, and then we'll wrap it up. But
Sure.
we actually didn't talk about your record collection. You're saying the specifics of it, how it's organized, those kind of things, and that's fine, right? Because I think
Well, I
most
want to say
people,
one thing about it, but go
yeah.
ahead and ask your question. I'll get my soapbox thing in.
Well, maybe you can work it into. But I guess my question is, it's kind of a two-parter. Do you consider your podcast an extension of or part of your collection? And along with that, is there, kind of this responsible feeling, or feeling of responsibility in terms of preserving these things? Is there some element of, again, it's archiving, it's preserving, because you're going out and you're seeking things out that you feel are a little bit kind of, left in the corners.
Yeah.
Uh, so do you feel that so is it part of your collection, A, and then B, do you think of the podcast as an extension of the collection?
Mm. Really, again, really good questions. I don't know that I've ever considered it a part or an extension of my collection, the podcast.
Interesting, really. Okay.
Not really, not really. Because ultimately my listening experience is solo and solitude.
Hmm.
Um, or I should say solitary. Uh, I like being at shows. I like listening with friends, especially the kind of friends who don't talk over everything. That they understand how to listen.
Yeah.
You talk after the words, but the,
Right.
for me, I've always really preferred the solitary experience, and that for me is my own. That's private. That's mine. I don't even do it with my wife. Like she loves music, but she listens in a very different way. And I do this for myself. And as much as I share in the podcast, in my books, in whatever I'm doing, there is a separation that I guess I need. Maybe as an introvert, maybe as somebody who needs a shit ton of alone time. Maybe that's why I say this, but um, I really don't consider it an extension of my collection. In
Okay.
terms of in terms of preservation, um, if that's, I think that you were getting, that was your other
Yeah, yeah,
comment.
sure. Yep.
Uh, yes. Yeah, I think it's really important to keep things in mind. It's the exact reason why we do the podcast is to shed a brand new light on something older. We rarely cover things that are brand new. This is about digging into our archives, our collections, and yeah, so there you go. In a sense, maybe it is an extension, but it's really more about turning people on, getting people to go out there to Discogs and get that CD or vinyl, that we're talking about. We do that almost every episode. We hear from somebody who went out and bought a few things because of us, and that's really great. I mean, that's the best part of anything I've ever done is when people are turned on and they go and support either a record store and or the band and or a label. Um, so to me, that's part of preservation. That's part of preserving a legacy. We've heard from bands we've covered that said, "Wow, you guys really made it feel like we didn't do this for nothing."
That's
Um,
awesome.
yeah, no, it's great. I mean, especially when they're our heroes. There's a band from Milwaukee called Die Kreuzen, who released 4 albums in the '80s and early '90s. Kind of started in the punk hardcore world and became this kind of like just eclectic, I don't know, alternative metal band. I don't know.
Hmm.
Um, but then they have an audience out there that, but it's small. And when we did our story on, or we did our episode on them, the singer Dan contacted us and said, I wanted to cry a couple times because I realized that people out there still really love us this way. And to hear you guys say it and express it that way was great. So
Yeah, it's awesome.
again, yeah, again, I don't know if that's preservation necessarily, but um, it is holding something up that we feel deserves time and attention.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah,
and
totally.
so, yeah, there's that. There is that.
Okay. No, I love that. Well, tell me what you wanted to say about your collection. Now I'm really
Well,
intrigued.
I'm always, yeah. You said you kind of said, oh, how people organize things or whatever, what, how they do. And look, it's completely personal. I'm not like a snob about anything. I think being a geek is great, but I think being a snob is kind of the worst characteristic you could have for anybody about anything. And there's a big difference to me between geek and snob. Okay. But I'm always amazed when I go to somebody's house or I'm just talking to them about their collections and they segment their collections off in genre. Like, here's my jazz part, here's my soul part, here's my metal part. Like, if they're people that listen, broadly enough to listen to, cross genres. And I don't get that, you know. Um,
Really?
my Billy Cobham record is right next to the corner record or whatever it is in the alphabet, like because it's all music. And I think
Mm.
for me, it's so important to reflect that in the collection, the way it's organized, which is simply A to Z. And artists are artists, music is music, and I just could never separate them out into genre. And then there's the argument I always make, which is like, where do you put Mr. Bungle? Like where are you putting that band? I mean,
Yeah. Yeah.
there are bands out there that just don't belong anywhere. I mean, you could put Led Zeppelin in prog, you could put Led Zeppelin in rock. You could, you know what I mean? Like it,
Yeah.
same thing with like Blue Oyster Cult, like I kind of think of them as an art rock slash prog band, also hard rock, also proto heavy metal. Where do you put them? So yeah, I just find it interesting when I had a friend recently. He's like, I'm dividing up my collection into genre. I'm like, you know how I feel, man. Go for it. But I'm not going to help you.
Oh,
I'm
that's
not coming
great.
over to alphabetize with you.
Yeah, I get that.
Anyway,
I like that. I like that philosophy.
yeah.
Okay,
But
so you
yeah, with everything,
alphabetize.
with everything to each their own,
Yeah, yeah. But you personally, you just alphabetize the entire thing.
for sure, for sure. And then then
Yeah.
I've had I was roommates with a guy I worked with at Relapse Records, also a complete and utter music head like the rest of us. However, I think it was part of just how his personality is, but like he never really alphabetized things. He might have all the Pentagram records in one spot and all the AC/DC records in one spot, but he wouldn't alphabetize them by name, by artist name. And
Hmm.
so there were a few times in the year and a half or 2 years we lived together where he's like freaking out because he can't find something he wants to listen to. I'm like, dude. Fucking, there's a way to get around that, you know. I don't think I think I would drive myself nuts if I didn't have it organized. You know, I thought that's how everybody did it, but apparently not.
Right, right.
Yeah.
Okay, so give me before we wrap this up, give me three albums everybody should go out and buy.
Well, I'm always going to say Rush Moving Pictures. I think it's a masterpiece of writing, performance, production. It's a popular one, but sometimes the cream rises to the top, and that thing is the greatest album of all time.
All right, awesome.
Um, how about I'm just going to throw this out there. The first version, and this is very important, the first edition of Typo Negative's Bloody Kisses.
Hmm.
There's a big difference between the one that came out a year later, less than a year later, just in terms of tracks, track order. Some were taken off, one was added. I just think that's a album that spans or obliterates genre, really. You have everything from Black Sabbath to Beatles to Doors to harrowing doom to gothic stuff. It's just Bloody Kisses is amazing. First version only. God, that's an impossible question, and you know it. Um,
Of course.
how about look, I could list a shit ton of extreme stuff, but I have a platform for that already. Um, I think I'll go again, very popular record, but one I think should be in almost every collection if you like anything relating to rock music or pop music or art rock music. Radiohead's OK Computer. I mean,
Okay.
that's probably a top 10 album for me. I just think it's these three albums that I've listed are what I consider perfect masterpieces.
Wow. All right, that's awesome. Um, all right, before we wrap it up with that one last question, where, plug the podcast, plug the book, tell us where we can find out more about Jeff, and the things that
Sure.
you've done.
Yeah, well, I think the best way is just the way we've been talking. Just I put myself out there. You can know me through Radical Research, which is at radicalresearch.org. You can also get it wherever podcasts are. You know, Apple Podcast has it, Spotify has it. All the platforms have it. If you want to be adventurous and skip around, like I said, we did a show on Rick Rubin's approach to metal bands. There's something for everyone, even if it's sort of an obscure left field sort of thing. So that might be fun. Um, the other thing is my latest book is on a band called Voivod from Canada, a band I've loved and followed since I was about 16, and I did this with their blessing and with their help. Um, and I'm very proud of it. It's 540 pages. It's a monster. I describe it as when you get it in the mail, it will drop in your hands like a Chicago pizza pie. It's very heavy. And that can be found at radicalresearch.org/voivod. It's on eBay. It's on Amazon. A few other distributors have it, and I'm very proud of it. And if you have any inkling about this band or any interest in diving into something different, and just seeing what I do in terms of my writing, it's the first time I did an oral history. It's an oral history because I was inspired by a few in that format, and so there's plenty of my narrative. There's plenty of my personality in there, but I definitely are. Oral histories are by design very quote heavy. So I did it that way this time. But there you go. And thanks for talking, Stephen. This has been fun to get to know you a little more. And I think I have a 2 hour interview to do with you about your architecture background and your that's really interesting to me. And we can talk a little bit about the National League East some more. So
Oh, the national, yeah, Phillies, they're a heartbreaker right now.
right now, is the National League East maybe the worst in
Oh,
baseball right now? Because like four of the teams are like under 500.
terrible. Just, yeah, I mean, my God. Yeah, yeah. Well, I would look forward to that. Okay, so let me, and I appreciate you saying that. So let me just give you one last question here.
Sure.
And again, the thing that just kind of to reiterate, the thing that I've found most enjoyable about this is just the different ways you have engaged with music from, kind of the beginning to now, really. I mean, it's pretty rare to find somebody who locks into something so early on and then, just again, engages, and I think that's really the right word. I mean, it's so much a part of, kind of who you are.
Oh God, yeah, for sure, for sure, for
Yeah.
sure.
I mean, so I've loved, hearing the description of how you listen. To me that sounded very almost meditative.
Yes,
Um,
yeah, the great word. I missed that word. That's great. Yep.
yeah, no, I mean, and I love the way you kind of talked about the way you research things and, the responsibility you feel to, again, preach the gospel of sort of the music and the bands and the things that you love. So many different ways you've talked about it. Just the last question is this all-encompassing relationship that you have with music. How do you think that it helps you to just understand yourself at like the core of who you are as a person? Like,
I was
have you
just
ever?
talking about, yeah, I was just talking about this with a friend of mine, a guy
Okay,
named
cool.
Paul Mosfidel from a band called Cynic. Um, he and I caught up about 5, 6 days ago, and we hadn't really talked at much length since the fire, and he was curious about the collection, and he was curious about because he recently moved from LA to San Francisco, and he dumped a lot of books and physical items, and he's a very Zen sort of guy. So he was, it was probably in his destiny to shed a lot of physical stuff. So we were talking about this, and hold on, please edit this, okay?
Yeah.
Um, And I was just relating to him what happened. And I said, yeah, it's physical stuff. And yeah, it can be burdensome, especially like, you and I on the baseball field recently talked about book collections and how heavy they are. And, it's just kind of maybe a good thing that I didn't, we had that conversation, right?
Yeah, yeah, totally.
Yeah, 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 about how heavy they are. So,
No, dragging those
there's
things
not,
around, it's like, you
yeah.
might as well
And I
collect
love
cinder
them.
blocks.
I know. And I've had to just let them go. But the thing is, music for me, whether it's physical or just the stuff in the air, is very much a reflection of who I am. It's like when you go into somebody's house and they have a music collection or a book collection, you look at what's on the shelf and you understand so much about them. Like I'm always going towards somebody's collection in their house. I just make a beeline right there because it'll tell me a lot about them.
Hmm.
And I love that, and for me, it's the same way. Like this is the truest reflection of who I am. And the music I listen to is what I am. I mean, I'm more. I don't think there's any music I listen to that really truly reflects my love of gardening and nature and cats, but it's all wrapped up in there. And um, yeah, I mean, I often call it DNA. Music is DNA.
Okay. Yeah.
It's part of my DNA. And I'm not the first person to say that, but it truly is that. It's that important. So again, I don't know if I've answered your question, but um, there it is.
No, I love it. Well, cool, Jeff. This has been awesome. I have I've enjoyed it. You know, could this have been 7 hours, 8 hours? Yeah. I
I
mean,
can I can go on. Yeah,
yeah.
it's the part of the passion, right?
Yeah, no, I mean, well, and that's the beauty of having podcasts and multiple episodes, and
Sure,
because
sure.
again, so many things that we just kind of touched upon that at some point I'd love to hear more about. But I really appreciate your time and
Yeah,
your
man.
openness to talk about something that is, and I know you're practiced at it, but it's still really personal, and it is something that it's just really fantastic when somebody shares something that's really meaningful to them. Because I don't know, I'm not sure what else there is in life, besides just kind of experiencing the world through other people, and then incorporating some of that into your own existence. And I don't know,
Oh, sure.
somehow for me, there's
Yeah.
this like, there's something that happens when you get to experience the world through someone else's eyes that makes my life better, which probably makes other lives better. And so I appreciate it.
Appreciate you having me, and get me the link to this thing, and I'll spread it to all my peeps, the radical research freaks and elsewhere. So we'll get you a few more listeners to your really cool podcast. I love the idea.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, thanks, Jeff. I appreciate it. Well, I hope
All
you
right.
have a fantastic night, and we'll see you on Sunday for
See you
baseball.
Sunday in the ball field. I'll try to hit another ripper to you.
Hit a rocket.
I'll do my best while I watch you, leave the yard.
We'll try. Thanks, Jeff. All right, we'll talk
Take care,
soon.
man.
All
All
right,
right.
bye
Bye-bye.
bye.